James Freeman on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
Right, so I think we're going to have a lively discussion now. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my next guest. She is Nuriyah Khan. She's a journalist, women's rights activist, and former Muslim. Welcome to the show, Nuriyah.
Thank you very much, James. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Nuriyah, what are your views on Islam? I've done a bit of digging around, looking at your X account and stuff, and you're very, very critical. Of course, you're a former Muslim as well. Tell us your views about Islam.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm a former Muslim myself, and having gone through this journey of being brought up in a Muslim household and then going through a situation where as an adult I actually had to deal with like real Sharia or Sharia law, what most people say, but that's a redundant word. But yeah, I had to deal with real Sharia kind of being enforced on me, and that's what really forced me to look into the actual tenets of Islam as an adult. Obviously, because you've been told a bunch of things in the mosque and by your elders and your parents and your community. And so you have this kind of vision of Islam in your own mind and you feel this feeling towards God. But when you actually dive into the scriptures with a clear, like level-headed mind, not looking to be impressed by, let's say, the Quran, as I always was intending to be, and as a child I always was, largely because it's in Arabic as well. So it's not even like your first language or second language. It's a language you have to learn to appreciate it. So having read the fundamental scriptures of Islam in English, i.e. the Quran, and because I come from a Sunni Muslim background, the Hadith, it was absolutely abysmal what I found in there, and it just made so much sense as to why there are so many violations of human rights in Islamic countries, and how women are so kind of hidden from society and have to take on so much. So yeah, I absolutely despise Islam, and I spend my spare time kind of trying to make other people realize how bad it really is.
Do you not think, though, because when you look at, I guess, and maybe you're not, you don't think any of the religions are any good. Obviously, you haven't said that. But, when you look at Christianity, and you look at the Bible, there's a lot of nonsense in there. And of course, in the name of religion and Christian religion, lots of bad things have been done around the world as well. And I accept, your position. I think there's a problem within Muslim communities, certain Muslim communities. We know about the grooming gangs, and there's other problems as well. But do you not think that they are cultural issues? Do you really think it's, I guess, sensible to attack Islam, given that we have got lots of, millions actually, of peaceful, law-abiding Muslims living in the UK? Do you not think this creates a scenario where essentially they feel attacked and discriminated against?
Absolutely not. I mean, there are obviously Muslims who are very, very good law-abiding citizens, and I would say that fundamentally, what makes them good is that they are better than Islam. And, and largely a lot of them don't understand or don't know or haven't looked into what is actually written in their own scriptures. Because if they did, I know plenty of Muslims who, if they were to tackle that head on, they would be as disgusted as I was. So, yeah, I think obviously these problems do to certain extents exist across all cultures, but Islam brings with it a whole heap of problems that are because of the claims that it makes for itself. It's not got any scope for reform or change. Or once the Quran, if you say that there's something wrong in that, then I guess the fundamentals of Islam collapse in on themselves. So the fact that they have to stay hell-bent, stuck to those kind of laws and dictates from the 7th century, it is a problem. And I will continue to say that Islam is the root cause. Even the grooming gangs, if you speak to some of the victim survivors, they say that the way that they operate are more similar to terrorist network operations, as opposed to just, kind of rape gangs or groomers or individual groomers.
What would you say then? And obviously we don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but what are I guess some of the worst things that you found in the scriptures then?
Oh gosh, I know, James, it's awful, but there's everything from basically, being able to marry children. There's no lower limit on the age that you can send your daughter to be married off, literally as a newborn baby, and then being able to consummate or have sexual intercourse with that child. It's just completely against any of the laws and how morality has moved on. So in the case of Prophet Muhammad, he himself has given a timeless example to Muslim men when he married a 6-year-old and consummated the marriage with her at 9. And this is verbatim written in their scriptures. And it didn't even seem to be a problem before for the Muslim world. But the fact that now we've got English translations or multiple translations at our fingertips, they're now scrambling to kind of add different kind of words to palette this down a little bit and make it more appeasable to a Western palate. But either way, it's awful. Unilateral divorce for men as well, half inheritance for women, flogging for adultery, all kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm still not sure what we're going to move on, but I'm still not sure where I sit on it, just because I think we've got the culture wars at the moment in the West with lots of different things, in trans ideology and whatever. But I really do worry about an us and them being set up between people that are not Muslims and the Muslims, many of, like you said, who might not even be aware of these terrible things which are in there, but suddenly, because they're Muslim and they consider themselves to follow the Islamic faith, we're creating a divide, and I just don't see that going anywhere positive. But I totally accept what you're saying there. I'm going to talk about now about a post I saw that you put on X, where you didn't put the post up yourself. Actually, you reposted it. It says, "Shame on you to Norway, Spain, and Ireland for basically calling for the recognition of a Palestinian state." Tell us why you supported that post.
Well, I mean, because again, coming from a Muslim background, I had grown up my entire life being completely on the other side. I'd lived in Saudi Arabia. I was wearing all the symbols for Palestine and all of that, not knowing what I was standing for. So having, seen what's played out from October 7th onwards, when the ceasefire was broken, it's abysmal to me how that what took place on October 7th was one of, the most violent atrocities against women and girls. And I mean, it's still being done. And for you or any nation state to come out, especially ones that try and strive for progressive liberal values and human rights, and, where you value women, to be able to give credence to the power in charge right now, the powers that be, Hamas, and try and recognize a state like Palestine, when even the ICJ couldn't, outright say that there's been any kind of war crimes that have taken place there. It just seems like it's very, very regressive for these countries to be supporting a regime like that.
So do you support then, because I guess, it doesn't necessarily mean that you support Israel. I guess that's my question. Do you support Israel? And also, what do you think? You say there was some terrible things that happened on the 7th of October. Just give us a couple of examples.
Yeah, as in these young girls and women who were attending the Nova Music Festival were literally abducted. And again, because Hamas, if you read their charter, it's very much in line with like actual Islam, the main fundamental Islam, in a way that Prophet Muhammad practiced himself. So the reason that girls and women are targeted, especially non-Muslim ones, is the very dark reasons behind it. And it's to hold them essentially as captives. And in Islam, you're able to keep them as sex slaves, unfortunately. And we have reports coming out of horrific things being done to them. So even in the case of Shani Luke, her body was paraded around, and that was glorified, and people were celebrating that. So I guess in terms of just showing the disgust for that, when it comes to Jewish lives or the rights of Jewish women, they're not given or held to the same standard as other women.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Some terrible things were done on that day. And we're just going to play a clip now, because I've got a clip of a Holocaust survivor who's talking about the conflicts, and I want to get your view on it. So studio, please, can you play the clip now?
I say this as a Holocaust survivor, that the genocide in Gaza is not happening in my name and in our name. The way that the Israeli government is using the memory of the Holocaust in order to justify what they are doing to the Gazans is a complete insult to the memory of the Holocaust. It's an outrage. When I saw the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations putting on a yellow star, or stomach turning, somebody who had to wear a yellow star like myself and my entire family, I'm insulted by that. What distinguishes the Jewish Holocaust is it's industrial scale and industrial methods being applied. And what has been happening to Gaza is similar in that the scale of the bombing and the indiscriminate nature of the bombing, the complete lack of care about children and women being the majority of the victims, amounts to industrial scale of genocide. The painting of the Palestinian people as worthless, almost animal-like by the description of some of the leaders. That dehumanization enables the population of Israel to tolerate what's going on. The way that Palestinian people who were arrested were treated, having to take their clothes off and parading them, it's part of the humiliation. In the West Bank, the way the checkpoints are organized, the way that you are forced to wait for hours for no reason in order to go to school or go to work, etc. All this amounted to humiliation, similar to what we experienced. The sort of determination and consistency with which they are setting about to destroy the whole of Gaza is very similar to the kind of cruelty and determination of the fascist regimes, some of the actions of the Nazi state in dehumanizing and completely cruel large-scale killings, etc. If it is repeated, I don't see why you couldn't make the parallel. It can only be helpful in understanding what's going on to make the parallel. I don't think there should be any taboo against that.
And Nuriyah, what do you make of that video and what he's saying?
Well, so it's an interesting one because obviously what is happening in Gaza it's disastrous. It's a humanitarian crisis, and the sooner that this conflict can be still hostages released, the better for everyone, because it is horrific, the scenes that are coming out of Gaza. But again, having said that, this is war. This is a wartime, and the ceasefire was broken on October 7th. And I think, obviously, there are far-right elements within Israel. I don't wholeheartedly support Israel or everything that the IDF does, not at all. But since the ceasefire was broken, and then literally looking at Hamas's charter and what's being chanted down to the streets of London, essentially, those chants are calling for the complete eradication and annihilation of Israel. So essentially, that state does not have a right to exist. And obviously, as a Holocaust survivor, you're going to have very, very strong feelings about, things that happen on this level and at this scale. But I do think the word genocide is being thrown around very, very callously, to the point where even we've got reports coming out from the UN now saying they are coming back on figures that they had initially put out as the death toll. And the Israeli army, and I think this is a good thing, but they are being held to a very, very high standard, which is good because that's how we've progressed and we've moved on as a society. But even the civilian to combatant ratio, it's still not at a level where even the ICJ could call it a genocide. So I just think we have to be careful of what's happening there, and it's a horrible time, but it is war.
You say it's war. Do you think it's right then to, and I think this is uncontested, the fact that Israel have cut off the water and stopped trucks going in. They've made it very, very difficult and essentially nearly starved over 1 million people. Is that just? Is that a right thing to do?
Absolutely not. If that's what's happening, of course, that's not right to do. My only issue is that it's very complicated because, as we saw in that video, when you're dealing with a terror organization like Hamas, and the reason they had to strip down those people is because you can't differentiate between who's a Hamas fighter and who's a civilian, and they've done that purposefully. So that's the same thing with if there is aid trying to get into Gaza and Hamas are deliberately trying to kind of derail that aid or send it into their tunnels or wherever else, then that's another issue we need to contend with. But if Israel is doing that deliberately, then of course that's problematic.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You've been an absolute fantastic guest, by the way. Very, very measured and balanced view, I think. I do take a slightly different position, but I totally respect your argument. And like I said, I think you've been a brilliant guest. Nuriyah Khan, ladies and gentlemen, journalist, women's rights activist, and former Muslim herself. Please do come back on the Freeman Report at some point.
Cheers. Thank you so much, James. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And to the rest of you, that's it from me today.
If you like these videos and want to support me in my activism, then you can support me on Patreon or PayPal. Stay free, everyone.